Well, welcome to another conversation. I have a very special guest with us today that I've actually been trying to get on to our chats for some time. And it's Ahmed Kilani, who is actually a prison chaplain. And I thought it would be really interesting today to talk about his world, his life, and of course, confinement, because during COVID, we've all had to confine into our own spaces and learn how to do things a little differently. So welcome. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about your background and what led you to prison chaplaincy.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks, Kathy, for the invite. I'm really happy to finally be able to do this. I've been doing chaplaincy for 6 years now as a prison chaplain. Previous to that, I was doing a lot of community work in the Australian Muslim community. I was born and raised in Australia, and all my parents were always involved in community work, and it was something that I inherited. And doing various different things from scripture teaching to interfaith work to working with leadership groups in schools and media. Then about 6 years ago, I was asked by the Islamic Council of New South Wales, which runs the chaplaincy program in the Corrective Services jail system, to come up with a vacancy for a prison chaplain. They asked me to do it, and I thought, oh, that's something I never really thought of doing before. And looked at it, thought about it, applied for it, and 6 years later, here I am, and I love it, and I'm just would love to do this for the rest of my working life, basically.
Really? So what is it? I mean, it's a really tough gig. What is it that you like? The fact that you can bring some connection to people in their daily lives that are actually doing it really tough.
Yeah, I guess people at the end of the day, when we talk about prisoners, and the first thing is, oh, they're criminals, they need to be locked up, they're dangerous human beings, and we tend to forget that they're just basically people that are going about their everyday life like the rest of us. And then some of them may have made some mistakes and got caught up in things. Some of them might have been some of these people that basically their upbringing was just so horrible. They never had, they're quite dysfunctional human beings, a lot of them. Some of it no fault of their own. And so they're just normal everyday people in my perspective. And our job is, it's called a correctional centre for a reason. So our hope is that if people do something that brings them into custody, that once they leave custody, they don't come back and they've reformed themselves, and that form of or corrections or correcting can be something that we can contribute to. So from our perspective, we look at the spiritual dimension, I guess. We focus on that, but we also help them with a whole heap of other things as well as chaplains.
So I mean, for many, it is about connection, because some don't necessarily are able to maintain connections with family or partners, and people drift away from them. So I gather you're like a steady person, or a steady group of people that they know will be there to talk to.
Yeah, definitely. We end up playing a lot, like a bit of a father figure for a lot of the men that we deal with. I deal with men only in the male jails. And we also, you talk to them and they'll say, I've only have one friend that visits me now out of all the people that I knew, or a lot of my family have just cut me off. Some people, their family, people might have come to jail once or twice, or they've done something that alienated themselves from their family. So we end up being, sometimes their spiritual support, their family, their friends, and we're happy to play that role when people are in a vulnerable position. We have to help those people. And I always say, you judge a society by how it treats the most vulnerable of your society. So people that are in jail, most of them eventually will be out there in the shopping centre bumping into you, living next door to you. Their kids will go to school with your kids. They're just everyday human beings at the end of the day, the vast majority of them. So we tend to lose sight of that fact. And if we can play that sort of role to give them some hope and comfort, so they can go back and be good, productive, law-abiding citizens again, then we've done a massive job.
And do you only look after the Muslim community within the prison system, or do you sometimes help other faiths or people of no faith?
So all chaplains, basically, we're usually assigned one jail or a few jails, and our brief is to look after all inmates. So we have chaplains that are Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, Jewish. So we are from faith groups, but we obviously, we will deal predominantly with our own faith group because they'll have their own special needs. But if you sit and watch any of us working, 90% of what we say is pretty much exactly the same. It's just giving these men hope, giving them, telling them about forgiveness, and just being there as a support to them, more like a life coach, I guess, than the religious aspect. So we do also look after staff. So staff have been doing it quite tough during the last 12 months as well because of COVID and a lot of changes in the jail system too, with privatisation and jails cutting back numbers. So yeah, we're there for everybody really. We're not just there for our own faith group, but obviously predominantly we would focus on that. So
you also look after the Supermax, is that correct?
Yes, I do look after the high risk management unit, which is also called the Supermax, which houses a lot of our pretty much all the terrorists that we have in custody. The majority of them are housed there, plus other violent criminals. So it's not only Muslims there, but obviously we have a whole cohort there of Muslims with regards to the terrorism charges.
So I guess, I have no experience of being in the prison system, and it's probably not something that I would lean to within my chaplaincy. Although, it's hard to know. You might end up writing to somebody that, as you say, good people do bad things from time to time. And that's really, the essence of what a correction centre should be about. The people in Supermax, have they lost hope? And is that difficult for you to try and give them some sense of meaning and purpose to their lives?
Well, there's always hope, and that's what we try and say. A lot of people in custody, whether they're in Supermax or elsewhere, they have a lot of regrets a lot of the times about consequences, and they have a lot of time to think to themselves. So in a jail environment, you're pretty much from between about 3 p.m. in the afternoon till 8 o'clock, 9 a.m. in the morning, you're locked in a room that's probably the size of your bathroom. Sometimes with someone else, and you get to share a bathroom and a shower, and sometimes, a lot of times on your own. And for the Supermax guys, that's probably even more. They're locked in a room for 22, 23 hours a day sometimes. So there's a lot of soul searching. There's a lot of time to think, contemplate a lot of things, and we try and do give them hope with a whole heap of ways. Can't change our past. Our future sometimes is not certain, but we can live in the present time. So we try and just let them do a bit of a structure, live day to day, week to week, month to month. And for some people, that it's actually, they find it quite comforting. That obviously a bit of adjustment, but human beings are amazing creatures where we're very resilient and we can adjust to a lot of situations. So, yeah, but guys, sometimes they do have sort of little breakdowns, and it can happen to a guy that's been in custody for a long time, and all of a sudden, or someone new, and obviously when you're sort of held in that type of condition, it does cause to play with your mind a lot too. So, and we're there to help them when that need arises.
Now, what would your day be like? You turn up at the prison and do you call it rounds? How do you tell us a little bit about a typical day.
So for us, in a jail, pretty much, it's not just officers there that are looking after prisoners that are in yards. There's also psychologists, there's welfare people, there's health, there's nurses, there's doctors. And there's also people like ourselves, the chaplains. So we come in, we can have referrals. So we might come in and there's some referrals for people that want to see us urgently. It could be something as basic as I'm guaranteed parole and I'm getting released. Can you help me outside? Or someone might have had news of someone dying in the family and they're not coping very well. We can come and help them. Or it could be something basic as I've come in new into custody and I want access to halal food or kosher food or religious books. So we look at referrals predominantly first, and then we will then go into the yards. I personally try and see the guys that are in the segregation areas first, because they're usually there, for being naughty in the jail, or they could be also there because they might have, say, attempted suicide, or so they're on watch. So those guys are usually suffering a bit of high trauma or going through something a bit more difficult than the average prisoner. So I focus on them and I guess their referrals, and then I will just go out to the yards generally and just talk to the guys and see who wants to have a chat, what's going on. And then we also do have structured things like Friday prayers and chapel services as well. So, and you don't know what you're going to get each day you come into the jail. That's the interesting thing. And human beings are just amazing creatures too. I find sometimes we're not all the times aware of the offences of the guys, and I personally deliberately try not to find out. I just try and treat them as a human being. Sometimes I will know what their offences are if they're high profile guys. And it's amazing how sometimes they have got very, very horrible offences, yet they just have turned their lives around. And when you talk to them, they're actually very decent human beings. And you're thinking, how did that person do that crime? It's just beyond me. And that's what I keep telling people, human beings can make horrible mistakes sometimes, but we don't just judge them forever based on that period of time in their lives. So people change, people move on. And that's what our role is. We just go in there as a ray of hope and ray of light to give these guys confidence and hope in a very harsh environment.
You said something so important, because when people are actually those that are released from jail, and they perhaps have a media profile, they're forever labelled ex-jailbird or ex-criminal, and it's just wrong. Once people have done their time, they are entitled to try and put their lives back together and move on, and we should be a lot more forgiving than we are.
Yeah, I think society, there's also the other end of that spectrum too, which is, innocent until proven guilty too. We have a lot of trial by media, and guys sometimes come into custody and they're found innocent. They weren't guilty of those crimes. So it's the same thing. It's about judgment, I guess, at the end of the day. And especially with the guys, we say that society said that the punishment for this crime is this many years or this much parole. Then once a person has come to jail, they've fulfilled those requirements and they go back out to society, then really they have paid for the punishment for their crime. And we should really be there trying to help them, become a normal citizen again, a normal human being that's done something wrong, paid the penalty for it. And it becomes difficult. Sometimes they say it's hard getting a job when, in the current environment. Sometimes if you have a university degree, well, try and get one when you've got a criminal record. And unfortunately, then it becomes a bit of a cycle. I don't want to give a job to someone that's got a criminal background, and then if that person can't get a job and can't support themselves, then sometimes if all they know is criminality, then that's the only way they can survive a lot of the time. So it's something that society, I guess, it's a discussion that they need to have on a greater level. But I always tell people it's called a correctional centre for a reason.
That's a really good point. Yeah. I will stop using the word prison. I will start using the word correctional centre. Yeah. And in fact, I'll even, when I talk about you as the chaplain in the prison, I'll actually say the correctional centre, because I think it's a good distinction. What's racism like in a prison environment? Is it really prevalent?
I guess it's like society in general. Whatever happens inside the jail is usually reflective of what's going on outside the jail. So, racism it's not something that's just happens behind the jail wall. It's really what's reflective of outside happens inside. But it's a little bit of a bubble society in here, and generally people they realise with the inmates amongst themselves that they need to just get on with each other because they're living in a confined space. They've had a lot of things taken away from them. They're all wearing the same uniform. So it's, in a sense, it takes a bit of identity away. And also a lot of the officers, they become more like, a lot of them are case managers as well. So their job is to actually engage with the inmates, talk to them, support them and help them hopefully reform themselves. So look, I don't see it any different to the sort of stuff I see in society. It gets reflected in here. So you have people from all walks of life that could be racist, that could be inmates themselves, it could be officers, it could be someone else, but it's just really reflective of what's happening on a greater level. There's nothing really different in custody.
Yeah, I think we're talking about that privately is we tend to gravitate towards people like ourselves. Like we don't necessarily reach out to people that are different from ourselves. And that's not a good human quality, because it's with understanding of different faiths, different backgrounds, that we become more tolerant. And it probably is really magnified in a prison or a correctional environment.
Yeah. Well, I've had one of my extremist guys that was living in a bit of a bubble, only with Muslims, seeing the world through that view of, Muslims being targeted and victims. And he said to me that what really sort of changed, he changed significantly in custody. And although, he was doing a lot of engaging with the psychologists and the chaplaincy, but he said the one thing that really changed him was having, because you can't really help who you get as a cellmate, was having a non-Muslim Aussie, Anglo-Aussie cellmate.
Absolutely.
Living with him and getting to engage with him. And he said, you know what? And even some of the officers as well, he goes, well, I can't judge all people that are not Muslim the same. I can see now that they're actually, some of them are actually very nice people. And it's amazing how, someone can go from being extreme to one end to then realize just through normal human interaction how, we're actually pretty much all very similar at the end of the day.
Really interesting. I remember quite distinctly in the days when we all took taxis, not Ubers, but I was in a taxi and the fellow driving was a young Muslim fellow, and he came from somewhere, must have been around the Auburn area, because he was talking about the food that was available, and we're having a really great conversation. And it got down to faith. And he was asking me all about what do Christians really believe, what, and I'm asking him, and it was a really engaged conversation. And what I felt in that moment is he went away thinking, I didn't know that. That's really cool. Like we, as you say, we're all so similar. And it is coming from a place of love for each other. Really, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, I always, tell people, we had this discussion before, you don't worry about your governments and your corporations and the media, or about, fixing the wrongs of society, the inequality and the racism. And it's up to us as individuals. And it's a simple thing as just engaging, as you said, just have a conversation, smile at someone, go to some other part of Sydney you haven't been to before, and just go visit a restaurant, or, all these little bits of engagements that we do. That's what breaks down barriers, stereotypes, and everything else. And unless we do that as society and as individuals, I don't think we can really rely on anyone else to change things. Because unfortunately, governments and media and corporations that have other agendas at times.
They do indeed. They do. Now, I've got to ask you, you went to New Zealand after the horrible terrorism attack over there. You were part of the Disaster Chaplaincy Network and you were asked to go. Is that how that worked?
Yeah, so I'm trained as a disaster recovery chaplain in New South Wales, and it's a really amazing network where they come in a lot of times for natural disasters like bushfires and things. So they'll be there helping people that are going through a lot of trauma. And when Christchurch happened, I sort of pretty much self-deployed, really. I saw what was going on there with the community and realised, I've got some skills that can assist there. And basically got one of the local charities to sponsor my trip there, and spent a week there just helping the local community through the trauma of what happened there. So it was an amazing experience, and it was something I'll remember to my last breath. And again, it highlighted to me when something, that one individual went there to try and create a lot of division amongst people, but it was completely like a huge wave of love that overrided all that, and it brought out the positivity and the love in people, rather than causing division. It actually caused people to come together, despite how tragic it was.
Yeah, it makes me quite emotional when you say that. Being on the ground, do you think it started with the Prime Minister, or was there just a feeling of forgiveness of those, which is a very difficult place to come from in a really challenging time, from the community? What was the vibe?
I think it was both. I think she emphasised that the role of what great leadership can do to a people. Like people will follow a leader that they believe is sincere and is there for everybody. And she was very, very sincere in her actions. And the people themselves as well, they just came together and said, like, you know, we're not going to allow this to divide us, and we don't, you know, we're so sorry for what happened. I kept walking around and people were coming up and just hugging me in the street and crying everywhere, saying, you know, I'm so sorry that this happened, clearly because they see me as being Muslim. And I had one case where a big Maori man just came up to me and said, you know, I'm really, really sorry for what happened. I said, look, you don't have to say sorry. It's not your fault. It was just one individual. And he said, you know, I was in the military and I've got a lot of weapons at home that are all legal, but I'm going to go and hand them in because I don't want, you know, anything like this to ever happen again. And I said to him, look, we think that this was a horrible tragedy, but would you have had this conversation with me previously? Would you have seen me walk in the street and come up and talk to me? He goes, no. And I said, well, can you imagine? I think this has been repeated probably tens of thousands, if not millions of times, not just here, but all around the world, people, an outpouring of love, or people coming together to condemn such a thing. So that's, you know, don't worry about the evil that happened. Look at all the love and that came from it. He just hugged me and started crying. And I think, you know, that's sort of like, I always believe that, you know, good people will overcome bad and the evil. And it's just that a lot of times we stay silent, and that sort of, in a sense, empowers and allows sometimes bad things to happen. So someone like what Jacinta did there, and the Prime Minister of New Zealand, was she basically took a leadership role of showing, look, I'm the leader, I'm going to go down and I'm going to pretty much hands-on go in there and say, this is how we're going to do this, and we're not going to allow this type of thing to ruin our society. So that then encourages other people to come forward. So, you know, I did say it's up to individuals, but of course, when you have a leader like that, it makes a huge, massive difference as well.
Yeah, it did. I mean, it just had a ripple effect all around the world. It was quite extraordinary. So I guess last two questions, and it's quite interesting. I was going to take a completely different tack with this interview, but the whole interview's been about love. So I guess it's appropriate. Two questions. You've obviously got a deep faith. What does spirituality mean to you? And then the second question is, how do you practice self-care, given that you do very tough days, you see and hear some really tough things? What do you do to make sure that you take care of yourself?
Yeah, in regards to spirituality, to me, I believe within human beings, we all have this innate feeling of being wanted, of being loved, of caring for others. I think we're all we feel the best when we're helping others. You know, we sometimes have this really amazing feeling inside of us. So innately, we all have this natural inclination to do goodness and to help others and to see people happy and see equality and see all these positive things. But how do we get that to happen? That's the tricky thing, because life is just like a rat race.
Yeah, it is a rat race. Yeah.
So you need to, whatever faith you are, you need to set some time. You know, I'm pretty answering both questions, I guess, with this answer. You need to set time aside every day, even if it's just like 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes at night, and really just reflect upon things, reflect upon who you are, reflect upon others, reflect upon how you can change things for the better. You know, think about people that are worse off than yourself. There's always someone worse off than yourself, no matter what the situation is. So if you have a strong spiritual sense in that sense, where you're contemplating a lot of what's around you, and appreciating what's around you as well, and trying to genuinely be kind and loving to other people, regardless of what society throws at you, which is hard. That to me is what spirituality is about. And when people have that aspect in their life, I find that they cope a lot better with life too, because they can withstand all the, you know, I always tell people it's like you're in a sailing boat and you're out in the ocean and it's calm water and the blue sky's out and the seagulls are squawking and, you know, you're going along flat water, and that's how life is sometimes. But then sometimes the sky will get dark and the clouds will come and the water will whip up and it'll be a massive storm, and you got to hold on and just for survival. And that's life is going to be like that. You're going to have your calm days and you're going to have your rough days, and you got to understand that, and you got to expect it and reflect upon all these things and know that when a storm comes, eventually the sun will come out again. And even if you're in sunlight, sometimes a storm will come. You got to expect that. So if you reflect and contemplate a lot of these things, that to me gives you a very, very strong sense of who you are and to cope with everything in society. So, and in regards to how I cope personally, so I use I do a lot of, you know, we call it zikr in Arabic, which is contemplation in the mornings, and you're encouraged to do it in the morning, at night, which is to sit there and just quietly contemplate, ask for forgiveness, praising God, thinking about your own actions and behavior for the day. With Muslims too, we pray 5 times a day, which, you know, people call it prayer, but I call it more like meditation. So to me, it's just, you know, just blocking everything off and just taking that 5-10 minute break and just relaxing again and going back to society. Also debriefing a lot, talk to other people, especially your colleagues, about how you might be feeling, or, you know, if you can't have your colleagues, it's good to have a chaplain. It's good to talk to, or
Absolutely.
a lot of people will talk to a psychologist or a religious person or just a colleague. It's really good to get things off your chest, as they say. So, and a lot of my job is really listening more than talking. And then, you know, once a week I'll try and do something like go for a bike ride or a cycle or something active too, just to clear my head and get everything going. So that's basically my coping mechanisms that work for me. But everybody's different. But yeah, but you need to do something, because there's no point. It's like, you know, you don't want to be a candle that lights the way for everyone else, but you're actually burning out yourself. So
absolutely, and you do have to consciously make those choices. You know, yeah, I mean, prayer, the way you talk about meditation and prayer, it's like such a part of your day that you don't really think about it. That's just what you do, and it's actually good for you, as well as being a spiritual connection.
Oh, definitely. And I think people, they call it mindfulness these days. They call it meditation. They can call it prayer. You know, they can call it Tai Chi. They can call it yoga. They can call it all sorts of things.
I know. I mean, I say that to people when people say, "Oh, spirituality, is that religious stuff?" You know, and I say, well, it can be, but it can also be, you know, even hanging out with your footy group, if that gives you a meditation sort of reflection moment. Absolutely. It's so different for everybody. So thank you for joining us. It was a really loving conversation. So I wish you a really happy day, and please come back and chat to us again.
I'll be happy to, and thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Okay, thanks.